Okay, I guess we are ready to go. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar today. My name is Nikita, and I'm a CEO of Zebrunner. If you never heard about Zebrunner before, we developed a modern test management platform that is suitable for teams of all sizes and domains. So the platform itself features a modular design that combines the functionality of traditional test case management solutions with advanced capabilities for automation teams. This allows you to prioritize automated executions within your QA strategy. So if you're in search of a test management system for your project or simply curious about the latest developments, please visit our website and check it out, right? So we have a free trial with no credit card required, or you can simply book a demo and we will tell you all about it. Getting back to our webinar, today I'm excited to welcome you to our new series of webinars featuring guest experts who will share their knowledge and perspectives on modern quality assurance. And I'm pleased to present you our speaker, Paul Grizzaffi, who is a quality engineering solutions architect at Nerdery. Paul, here you go.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for having me. And thank you everyone for joining me at this potentially very early hour for you or very late hour, depending on where you are. So let's get going. Today, we're going to talk about the hidden insights of automation reporting and going beyond just the basic red and the green. So a little bit about me before we get into it. So my name is Paul Grizzaffi, and I am the QE Solutions Architect at Nerdery. I spent my career focused on automation and automation adjacent activities, and I'm also an advisor to the Advanced Research Center for Software Testing and Quality Assurance at the University of Texas at Dallas. If you would like to contact me outside of this particular forum, I'm on many of the socials here. Also, the link at the bottom there is the link to my blog where I hopefully write some moderately cogent things for you to enjoy. So let's jump right in. So to give a level set, automation is software, whether it's record and playback or drag and drop or AI generated or you're writing code in JavaScript or C# or Python or whatever, it's all software. So once we understand that the software is doing something for us. What is the software doing? We have a product. The software is a product, right? Now, the software is the thing that gets us our product. So if you think about an e-commerce app, the e-commerce app is not the product. The product is the laundry detergent that you wanted to order. Nobody wants software, right? I mean, weird people like me, I like playing with software and stuff, but as an end user, you don't really want to have to use software or an app. What you want is your laundry detergent. You want to be able to think and go, laundry detergent, and have it show up 10 minutes later on your doorstep. We're not there yet, right? We may never be there, but the idea is that the product is not the software, right? The product is what you get from the software. So what is the product for automation, right? What's delivered by an app? Well, an app is software. Like I said, so is automation, and that will be a theme throughout what we talk about here. But the end product is different. We're not getting laundry detergent. We're not getting an appointment at the doctor's office. What are we getting? Information. The whole idea of automation is to help testers be more effective or more efficient at their job. Possibly both, hopefully both. But what is their job? Uncovering potential risk. Here's what we did. Here's what we didn't do. Here's what we think we probably should do. But hey, Mr. Decision Maker, Mrs. Decision Maker, should we keep testing or should we release the software? That's what the automation is for, is the additional and hopefully faster creation and production of information for decision makers to make decisions on the quality of the product that they are planning to deliver. So we have to make the product valuable, all right? And the product for this test automation is information, and that information comes in the form of logs and reports. That's how we know what happened and didn't happen, or what the software thinks happened and didn't happen, because there could be a disconnect there between what we think the software is doing versus what it's actually doing. But we'll skip that just for now. But in order to make it valuable, it has to provide value. I mean, for not to put too fine of a point on it. But if we follow the three ABLEs of automation and reporting, then it's more likely to be more valuable. And in this case, what I mean by valuable is more appropriate, more more in line with what it is you need to receive from a tester standpoint to say, I can go on to my next job, I can go on my next activity, I need to spend more time on this activity, something looks good here, something looks bad there. So of the three ables, we have available, applicable, and understandable. Available seems pretty obvious. However, I did have a client one time who had a failed test automation initiative, partially because the reporting and logging wasn't available. So what do you mean it wasn't available? It was logged and stored in a place that not everybody that needed access could have access to. So it seems pretty trivial these days, right? It's in Jenkins or Azure DevOps or whatever. You can just go click the link as long as you know where it is. But making sure people know where it is and that they have appropriate licenses and access and authorization to be able to get to those logs is essential. Otherwise, they can't act on them and they become sort of useless at that point. And are they applicable? We have a tendency in our automation to do one of two things: log too much, so it's hard to go through, or log not enough so that when issues happen or we find something that's a little squirrely and that we need to investigate, we don't have that piece of information. So we would have to add that piece of information, run it again. Hopefully it's not an intermittent issue. If it's an intermittent issue, then we have to wait until it happens again and then go and check our new log. So we have to find where that balance is between it's too much and it's taking me too long to figure out what happened, and it's not enough, so I can't actually perform my job. That will all be situation dependent, right? Context dependent, where some teams will need a certain amount of info, other teams will need another amount of info, and it might be situational even within those teams where in general, I only need this amount of detail. However, when we have a certain type of problem, I need all this other detail, and figuring out a way to provide that, but also make it digestible in the normal case or the typical case is can be a good balancing act for you there. And then they have to be understandable. For people like me who work in test automation down in the dirty nuts and bolts of everything, getting things like, hey, HTML element XYZ didn't exist or wasn't clickable or was behind another element or something like that, that means stuff to me. Not everybody that is consuming and acting on the results of test automation have that level of expertise to be able to digest and use that. If we can create our logs and put them into a jargon, a vocabulary that more people understand without making it difficult for the lower level people to go in and dig in the nuts and bolts, that's a good balancing act. And I'll show you an example of that here in a little bit. And remember, logs are only valuable if, like I said, if they provide value. And that value will definitely be context dependent. What's valuable for one team may be noise for another team, and vice versa. So the logs are also your bridge between what the machine is doing for you and what you would normally do for you. So there has to be some trust there. If you don't trust your automation, you might still run it, but then you're also going to go and double check a lot of things. You're going to rerun some of that, quote, by hand. And that starts to diminish the value of your automation, because if you're having to go back and redo some things without the automation that the automation was supposed to do, then the value is not quite there. So we have to have some level of trust, sort of that trust but verify kind of thing, right? You have to audit from time to time to make sure it is doing what you're actually wanting it to do. But if you don't have the trust, you're not going to value it. And visibility is the number one way to get trust. Understand what it's doing, make the code available, make the logs available, put enough stuff in the log so that you know what the automation is and is not doing. So appropriate logs show the actions. I click this, I sent this message, I received this response, I have all this information here, so that when you find something that's a little weird, hey, this doesn't seem to be working right, but the automation is saying it is. Let me go back and see what's going on with the automation. Is the automation wrong, or is my assumption about what I'm viewing right now wrong? It needs to show what happened, and it also will show what didn't happen. How does it show what didn't happen? Well, if it's not in the log, it might not have happened. So that's another aspect of trust. So transparency is key, because if there's no trust, there will be no value, because you will not run it, or you will basically reperform those actions by yourself, by hand, where you've already spent all this effort and money and time putting together this automation package, and now you're just redoing the work. That's just, it's just not going to work out for you well. And it is crucial when randomizing. So a part of testing often is doing random stuff, right? Adding in a random value to some field, seeing what happens, seeing if it breaks, seeing if it accepts it. If you don't log what you're putting into the system, then you can't really do an effective job of debugging if there is an issue, if there is a problem along the way. So it really needs to be your trail of breadcrumbs of personifying the automation is, I did this, I did that, I checked for this, I found that, I found this other thing, I did not find this thing. That trail of breadcrumbs is crucial, and it's actually crucial in everything, but it's even more crucial in randomization, because you won't know what you sent into the system if you're randomizing things and don't log it. And yes, good and appropriate logging can absolutely reduce costs. Why? Because finding issues takes effort. Hey, something happened in the system, in the app, in the whatever we're testing, and I don't know what happened. I need to go and find out. You dig through the application logs, and nothing jumps out at you about something good or bad happened. You look at the automation logs, and nothing good there or bad there. You're stuck. You're spending a lot of time doing debugging, triaging, trying to reproduce things, where if you've got some good logs, it can help you get there faster, because fixing issues also takes the effort, and testing those issues takes additional effort as well. So expending effort is a cost. Specifically, it's an opportunity cost, because if you're spending time trying to track down an issue, then you're not doing something else that is either going to reduce your company's cost or bring your company some additional revenue. So that's the idea of the opportunity cost there. So minimizing the effort in general is good, but minimizing the effort on issues is something we really can take to ourselves and say, okay, we can be responsible for helping us be more effective and more efficient at this debugging and error reporting activity. So appropriate logs can reduce the effort. So what do good logs look like? And I have good in quotes, because good for one team is not going to be good for another team, right? Here, good should be switched out for appropriate. What logs are appropriate for this product, for this team, and this organization, and this company, and this business sector, for us to be able to meet our business goals and have automation be in support of the testers, and the testers in support of the developers, and the developers writing each line of code that basically directly, or at least indirectly, maps to one of the business goals of the organization and the company. So what do these good logs look like? Well, there's just enough information. It's all the information I need for this problem, nothing more, nothing less. Now, that's magic. That doesn't really exist. Usually you're going to fall on one side or the other, kind of like we talked about earlier, where we will either have a little too much logging or a lot too much logging. One of the things I'm a fan of is log too much, but make it filterable. Hey, I only want the logs that are at this level of severity, or at this level of detail most of the time. But I want to be able to dig into individual log activities when I'm debugging, because so many of the errors, especially these days, and I actually gave a talk on this a couple of days ago, is that we have these intermittent failures. And it's very difficult to reproduce some of them because we have so many interconnected systems, both within our own sort of product area, but also the third parties that we talk to for analytics and for payments and other marketing type of activities. We're dependent on those, and we cannot necessarily depend upon their certain timeliness in responding to messages and requests that we send out to them. So these intermittent errors are even more prevalent these days, at least in my experience. So having that log there, having enough of that information there so that when that issue does happen, we can go back and have a look at it without having to try and reproduce it is key. I was working with a client just last week where we're having one of these intermittent issues, and we discovered that, oh, hey, there's some additional logs that we can turn on in this part of the application to be able to give us some information back that we didn't have before. Now, these were app logs, and a lot of what I'm talking about here definitely goes toward logs from the application as well, but my domain is test automation, so I focus on that, right? So just enough information. It needs to tell you what's going on, or probably what's going on. Right here, I sent in a 12 and I expected back a 4 and I got a 3. Often that means this happened. That means that there was a calculation error on the back end, or that means there was a communication error with third party XYZ. If it can give you some guidance on where to look first, even if it doesn't mean necessarily that the problem is there, but start looking there because that's probably where the problem is. It can point you somewhere that it will take you less effort on average to debug and report each of these issues. And that they're written in a meaningful way. Meaningful meaning that whoever is consuming these logs and needing to act upon them can understand them without having to go to some sort of catalog and say, okay, error 304 means this thing in this part of the product, and it means this other thing in the other part of the product. Because each action you have to take while performing this debugging, while performing this reporting, takes time. It may take seconds, it may take minutes, it may take tens of minutes. Each thing reduces the value you get because you're having to expend more effort to figure out what's going on. And that they're written in an actionable way. I expected a 4 and I got a 3. Okay, that's actionable. Why? Because we know what value I was expecting. We know what value we got. All right, I can go and do something about that, right? I can talk to a developer. I can snoop in the system myself. There are various different things that we can do once we have the right amount of information. But also, don't get so bound up in when we talk about logs. It doesn't have to just be text, especially in cases where we're doing some sort of GUI automation, which I know is a sin, but sometimes we need and should do GUI automation in certain circumstances. Having something visual. Here's what the screen looked like when I expected it to look differently. Or, hey, here's what I expected it to look like. Here's what it actually looked like. Having all of that information at your fingertips or in one place where you can click and check and go straight through without having to go to multiple locations to get all this stuff will reduce the effort, which increases the value. So again, what do good logs look like? I'm a music guy, and of course you can never ever have too many copies of Ozzy's Bark at the Moon. So I decided I want to buy Bark at the Moon yet again, and it fails. I couldn't do it, right? Something happened in my test script where I tried to add it to the cart and it failed. Imagine having logs that look like this. Hey, failed to add Bark at the Moon to the cart. Very helpful, right? But there are more details there. If you get a screenshot with this, well, then you might see, oh, hey, yes, the add to cart button is not there. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't, right? You might need more detail. So we go one level down. Well, they couldn't find the add to cart button when they tried to click it. So what this log tells you is You were trying to add to cart and you tried to click it, but the test couldn't find it, right? The tool could not find it for you. Why? Oh, the particular web element with a particular ID could not be found. Some people who are consuming and acting on these results would stop at the first level, right? The line 49 there, because that's their level of expertise. Then they would have to go to someone else to get help for anything else. Other people might understand the first two lines, right? The 49 and the 107. Oh, couldn't find the add to cart button. Let me go to the screenshot and say, do I visually see it there? Oh, I visually see it there, but I don't know much about HTML, so I don't know how to go and figure out this flum element OP thing here. Let me go talk to someone. Or someone like me, and many of you as well, who work at multiple levels of the testing and test automation pyramid, if you will. We understand all of these things, and we can go and look at the HTML, and we can dig in there, and we can figure out, was it there, and did the tool miss it? Was there an unhandled race condition in the automation where we looked for it before it actually appeared? Did the ID change? Did the developers change the ID for a good reason or a not good reason? Any of these types of things we can go through and debug because we have all of the information here. Now, this is clearly a rudimentary example, and here we would have the screenshot as well. But think of this and expand it out over hundreds or thousands of tests. Now expand it out over, let's say, a whole suite of API tests where you're sending and receiving REST messages to your backend. Wouldn't it be awesome if you logged exactly what you sent and exactly what you got back so that if some of the checking fails, some of your assertions along the way fail, you can go back and look at the exact message that appears to have been sent and the exact message that appears to have been received and look and see, yes, okay, this value didn't match that value, but what did I actually get? Oh, wait, I got a 404. I wasn't expecting that. So then you can go back and do the debugging on just that particular piece, because if you just go red, green, pass, fail, there's value in that. But the cost of going through and debugging all of that and having to rerun and dig through a lot of stuff is it's high, especially for something that you can add a couple of lines of code to be able to be able to get this information out. It will save you hours over the course of time. Now, a colleague of mine said, well, wait a minute, why would you bother doing all of this stuff? Tool XYZ does this for you already. Well, good. If you're using tool XYZ, don't add stuff to it if it's not going to add value for you. However, not everybody has access to tool XYZ because of licensing issues, because of security issues, because of cost. You know, not everyone has deep pockets like other companies do. And I see this across all my clients. Some clients have willing to spend and invest on tooling and stuff. Other clients, they have a very strict budget for one reason or the other, and they want to get the most work they can out of that. And if it costs some more on the back end, they'll deal with that later, but they can't afford the upfront licensing costs just because it's not that the upfront licensing costs aren't, there's no value there. It's that they don't have the latitude to expend that money. So be appropriate. Do what's appropriate for you. And if you switch companies or teams, it may be a different thing that's appropriate. So if your tool just out of the box gives you all the information that you need every time, or most of the time, perhaps adding additional logging isn't valuable to you. But this stuff, right, this information from the logs is going to be essential. So you need to make sure that the tool does that or has the facility for you to be able to add your own as well. Okay. What should I do as just a practitioner? What do I recommend? So first, review and update your logs. Look at what comes out of your test automation runs. I like to do this as part of a code review. Hey, we wrote a new script, or we created a new script or a new thing, and run it. All right, cool. What comes out? Can I tell what happened? Or am I scratching my head about what happened between line 4 and line 5? If so, you might need to turn the logging level up or add some additional logs in there. Make it fail. Look at what the failures look like and say, if I were to get this failure running in my pipeline where I'm not actually watching all the things flash on the screen, or if it's an API, more programmatic sort of automation where there is nothing to look at, can I tell what did and did not happen? And can I debug based on this? If not, you probably need to make some updates there. And also look at the passes, right? We always focus on the failures. Very important to focus on the failures, but look at the passes as well, because does it tell me what it's actually doing? Has something changed where it now should be checking another thing that it's not? All of that is a vital part of our test automation ecosystem, right? Of the life cycle of what we're doing. If you're evolving your product, you probably need to evolve your test automation because, again, software and software, but also the automation needs to be in parity to the product of what the product is and is not doing, and it needs to report those things out. I do the same thing with your scripts, right? Review them, update them, make sure the logging's right, make sure they're doing what they're supposed to do, nothing more, nothing less. Because if they're doing more, then you're probably wasting time. If they're doing less, then you're potentially missing opportunities to catch something that might introduce risk into your delivery. And anything that's not providing value, hey, we have duplicated test scripts. Hey, this one runs a long time. Hey, this other one runs and fails half the time, and the other half is it's fine. Address that. Don't just eat that up because, like I talked about the other day, you run into what's called failure fatigue, and then you're just going to spend more time looking at things, and you're going to get tired, and you're going to say, "Oh, I already know what the answer to that one is." But it actually produced a different error. And we can go down all sorts of sort of rabbit holes with that. But anything that's not adding value, address it. Either fix it, remove it, whatever you need to do, because if it's not providing value, it's costing you something. And treat logs as reducing time to feedback. Richard Bradshaw, many of you probably know who that is and follow him. He introduced a term to me called time to feedback, and I love this. I love this from a test automation standpoint, from a testing standpoint in general, excuse me, but from an automation specifically is helping it to reduce the time to feedback. How quickly can I know something valuable about my product? The one I just blew it into dev, or blew it into the QA environment or production. How fast can I get feedback on what it is and is not doing? The better your logs are, the lower your time to feedback is, because you can zero in on the most important parts for yourself. And sort of adjacent to that is we can accelerate time to market. If you spend less time evaluating, if you have to spend, if you get to spend less time evaluating your product to assess its risk, then you can decide whether or not to release quicker, and therefore the release happens faster and you're in the market faster. So your new features or fixes are out there faster, meaning you will get your revenue faster or your cost savings faster. I was at a conference one time, and one of the vendors there asked me a question, and I wasn't quite prepared for it. And he said I should do a whole talk on this, and I'm not quite prepared for that yet. But what do you want? If you were designing a test automation tool, what do you want? What do you want it to be? What do you want it to do? And this was several years ago. What I want and what I need is vastly different now. But when it comes to logging, I have a pretty good idea of what I want and need. Is I would love a tool, set of tools to collate the logs from the test automation, from the product, from any third parties. And I understand some of this is magic, right? But to have all of that put in one spot where if I encounter something suspicious, or if I encounter an issue, I can have these time synced logs where I can say, this happened in the automation, this happened in the product. Then we talked to these third parties, and this is what happened with them. We got these responses back, and then the product did this, the automation did that. And oh, wait, we had a mismatch in there somewhere. I would absolutely love to have something like that. And I think in general, the test universe would like to have something like that as well. An indication of the likely cause of the issue. I worked at a company one time where we had this tool. It was an in-house built tool, and what it did was it ran these thousands of calculations and then compared them to the expected results. And we got a large failure percentage because some of the data would change and the rules of how the calculation was supposed to work had changed. And the golden files, if you will, weren't always updated in sync. It was more of a, if it fails, go investigate it and then fix what's appropriate. It would have been great if we could have run a tool on all those results to say, this stack, this pile, hopefully the larger one, is a data mismatch. Go check the data. Oh, but wait, this pile, hopefully a much smaller one, this is probably a calculation or coding error. Start with those. Go check those out first. That would be awesome. And then failure trends and problem spots. So going back to that first item there, if we have all this correlation, we have all this data, we can use magic AI, or we have something that can go and say, based on your last 100 runs or your last 10 releases or whatever, here is where I'm seeing problem spots for you that you might need to test more, that you might need to be a little more judicious in your development activities, or anything that says, historically, here's what happens in the situation you're about to be in. And prediction of failure causes, right? I did touch on that a little bit before, where we have the, hey, something failed, tool runs on it and says it's probably a script error, parity with your product. It's a tool error. Hey, we went and sniffed the internet, and this particular issue generally is a problem with the tool. Here's a workaround. You have a data mismatch. The configuration isn't right, or heaven forbid, there's an actual issue in the product. So a couple of takeaways before we jump to questions is, remember, in this environment, if you treat the automation as software, as you should, information is the product. We have to create logs to deliver that information where it is appropriate and digestible and usable. Keep in mind the three ABLEs, right? So the available, applicable, and understandable when it comes to your logs and reports. Think about reducing time to feedback. How quickly can I figure out what's going on? Or can someone who is taking action on these logs figure out what's going on? So reducing the time to feedback, which reduces the time to fix and reduces your opportunity cost. And trust is absolutely, absolutely essential. If you don't trust your automation, you will not use it effectively, and it will not be effective for you. Appropriate logs can help build trust because you can see that trail of breadcrumbs about what the scripts and the tool did or did not do. So I will kick it over for questions now.
Paul, so I see that we have a question in the Q&A section of the Zoom. Can you see it, or do you want me to read it out loud?
Could you read it? Because I'm not quite sure where that is. I can't find it.
Yeah, so Ryan is asking about handling the multi-threaded test execution. He asking how exactly this can be done in the context of logging. So the question is quite long. Let me just read it out loud. So how do you handle multi-threaded? Yep.
Oh no, please do.
Yeah, so basically the question is, how do you handle multi-threaded test execution? By using such a verbose level of logging, the run logs are going to be extremely noisy and, nigh impossible to parse because file name 2 isn't going to be the next line after file name 1 due to other tests being executed and outputting their info in between. So that is the question.
So that's a very good question. There are a couple of different ways to handle that. And again, it needs to be context appropriate for you. One of the tools I've worked with, one of the frameworks I've worked with is they have individual log files. So if you're running 100 test cases, you're going to get 100 different log files, which is both convenient and inconvenient, right? You don't want to have to go through 100 different log files to debug things. But if you build your automation such that each of the tests is relatively contained and should not be interacting with each other, then the parallelization and having these multiple log files is not the end of the world. So that's one way to handle it. Is everybody gets their own file, so there is no interleaving of what's going on. I worked on another system where we had the notion of two different kinds of files. We had a report file and we had a log file. The report file was consolidated. So if you ran 10 test cases all at the same time, you would get the logs and the results in the order in which they completed. So if test case 4 completed before test case 2, you got that in the log. I'm sorry, in the report in that order. But the log file was consolidated so we could see not only what it was doing, what the tests were doing to the system, we could see if they were inadvertently interfering with each other. And we would do file locking, so we're only logging one thing at a time and made sure that the text wasn't mixed up between the lines. But yes, you would get multiple test script logs or test case logs in the same file. And we would just make sure that we gave them an identifier of, okay, the name of the test case would also go on the line with the log. Not perfect. None of it's perfect. And really, it just needs to be applications or situation specific.
Thank you, Paul. So we have the next one, and the next one is about like, what is the best way or tool or library to add logs in test?
So really, there's no such thing as best. There's most appropriate, and whatever you need is the best for you. I've created my own logging libraries. I've heard very good things about Allure. I was told the other day, why are you fooling with all of this stuff? Playwright just dumps this out for you automatically. Cool. I mean, whatever's there, use it. If it's not sufficient, then add to it. But if there's something else that you need, do some snooping around, do some prototyping. And when you prototype with your stuff against your system, not necessarily against some like the internet or RESTful Book or something like that. Those sites are awesome for the first part of your prototype, but you ultimately need to run it in your environment against your product to see if it's giving you what you need in your situation. So I don't have for reporting, I just don't have a go-to or even something that comes out and says, on average, I normally go to this.
If I may, for reporting, I can always suggest Zebrunner automation reporting. So that is why we built it in the first place. just saying. Yeah, not really Paul's opinion, but yeah, take it or leave it.
Slow down.
Yeah. So we have the next question from the audience, which is about tips or best practices that you can recommend for effective automation analysis process, especially for teams with limited time or resources.
Oh, all right. That's a bit out of scope for this talk, but in general, I have a couple of different things that I generally think of. If you have something today that you didn't have yesterday, and that thing is providing you value, then keep doing that, right? If something is not providing you value, stop doing that. If you're a code-centric shop, then coding might be a good way for you to do some automation. And automation doesn't necessarily have to mean test case goes into tool and comes out test script. It might be, hey, I spent a lot of time loading data into this app. Write a little Python script or Perl script or whatever that will do that for you. And then you've gotten value out of mechanization. And therefore, I consider that automation. It's not the traditional idea of test automation. I call it automation assist, but it's value. So that's the way I would look at it, is look at it and go, where are you spending your time? Take the top 2 or 3 or 4 places you're spending your time, the most effort. or the stuff that's most tedious, or the stuff that's most difficult. Then figure out which ones of those is the most mechanizable, the one that is most automatable, that machines will be good at, and you can trust the machine to do it properly. That's your first place to start. But other than that, that's such a broad question. And that's one of the things that I do at Nerdery is I can go into companies, look at what they're doing, look at what they're struggling with, look at what's working really well and say, don't change that. And then give advice, recommendations, and a roadmap of how we can help you put that in place. So it really, really is situation dependent, because I'll go into clients and I'll see the same sorts of problems over and over, but the solutions aren't always the same.
Thank you, Paul. So we have one more from Alexander. So Alexander is asking, like, are there any suggestions for multiple test reporting handling? For example, if you have like one report generated from Java plus rest assured, and then you have like another one from TypeScript and WebDriver.
So when I was at a previous company, we created a, I say we, I gave a couple of ideas. Other people actually did the coding. But we created a test framework on top of multiple tools. So it would run on top of Selenium and Appium, and then the Microsoft stack of for APIs and stuff like that. And we would take in and not intercept, but we would have a facade in front of what the test script writer used and what we're actually sending out of the back end of the test, bring it in and log it in a consistent fashion. So you could have a log that had all of these different types of technologies in it. You could have a script that used a browser, sent some REST calls, and then finished whatever was going on the mobile app. It was intricate, right? I mean, we're talking across multiple technologies here and multiple programming concepts in some situations, but you could get consolidated logs that way. That's I won't say that's the easiest way. That's the most convenient way once the work is done. But if what we're talking about is, hey, we're running some stuff in Postman and we're running some stuff in Selenium, and I want to consolidate those results, that's going to be difficult because they're both running independently of each other. If you want consolidated results, you have to have a consolidator, and usually that's what you run from. Other than that, you have to do some weird stuff with timestamps, maybe. I'm not really, again, and I hate to say this, but it's true in pretty much every situation, is that it is context dependent. What are you trying to do? What problems are you seeing? Is there another way to go about it that perhaps you haven't thought of? But generally, I would say use some sort of consolidated framework or tool, or try to move in that direction.
Thank you, Paul. Once again, obviously biased, but once again, like Zebrunner automation reporting is just about that, about this consolidation of artifacts, runtime blocks coming from different test frameworks. So that is like, to my mind, that would be like the perfect, obviously to my biased mind, that would be the perfect way to do something instead of building something of your own. So yeah, if that helps, Alexander.
I appreciate you calling out the bias on that. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, obviously. Okay, so I guess we don't really have any other questions yet. So maybe like let's give audience like another 30 or 45 seconds. Yeah, in the meantime, Paul, huge thanks for the webinar. It was really, really great content.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And thank you for everyone that took time to attend.
Okay, so I guess we won't see any more questions today. Like, yeah, but I see them people saying thanks. So yeah, once again, thank you, Paul. Thank you for being with us. Thank you for delivering this great webinar for our audience.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Take care. Bye.